Sleep did not come easily that night. For the first time in 6 months, Arthur's mind was not solely occupied with the past. A new thought, small but persistent, had taken root. The promise of the morning. When the sun finally rose, casting the same pale light across his bedroom floor, Arthur felt a subtle difference in its quality. He didn't linger in bed. He swung his legs over the side with a sense of purpose that felt foreign. Downstairs, he made his coffee with a quicker, more decisive set of motions and drank it standing by the kitchen sink, his eyes fixed on the backyard. Eleanor's garden looked even more daunting in the morning light. It was a wilderness of neglect. For a moment, his resolve wavered. But then he pictured the boy's face, the unadulterated brightness of his smile. No, he had said he would be here, and he would. He found Eleanor's old gardening gloves on a hook in the back porch. They were stiff, the leather cracked, but they smelled faintly of her, of soil and rose petals. He pulled them on, his large, arthritic hands fitting clumsily into the spaces her slender ones had once occupied. He grabbed a rusty trowel and a bucket and stepped out into the humid May air. The work was brutal. Each weed he pulled was a protest from his lower back. He started along the stone path, clearing the encroaching crabgrass and dandelions. With every motion, a memory surfaced of Eleanor on her knees, her face smudged with dirt, looking up at him with a grin of pure contentment. He was just a man pulling weeds, but it felt like an apology, an act of remembrance that was active, not passive. He began the search for the ball, his eyes scanning the dense foliage. He poked the trowel under the drooping heads of the peonies and peered behind the overgrown rose bushes. He was beginning to think it was a lost cause when his eyes caught something nestled deep in the English ivy that climbed the back fence. There it was, tucked away like a bird's egg in a nest. He reached in, his fingers closing around the stitched leather. He held it in his palm, feeling its satisfying weight. He smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that reached his eyes. He put the ball on the porch railing and went inside to pour himself a glass of water. He spent the next few hours in a state of quiet anticipation. The house was still silent, but it felt less oppressive. It was a waiting silence now, not an eternal one. At a little after 3:30, he heard the sound of sneakers on the pavement, followed by a hesitant knock on the front door. He opened it to find the same boy, his baseball cap slightly askew, his face hopeful. "Hi, sir," the boy said, a little out of breath. "I'm back. My name's Leo." "Hello, Leo," Arthur replied. "I'm Arthur, and I believe I have something that belongs to you." He led the boy through the house to the back porch. When Leo saw the baseball sitting on the railing, his face broke into that same brilliant smile. "You found it. Wow, thank you." He snatched the ball, tossing it from one hand to the other. Arthur gestured to the 2 rocking chairs on the porch. "It's a hot day. How about a glass of lemonade before you go?" Leo's eyes widened. "Sure." Arthur went back into the kitchen, his movements feeling lighter than they had in months. He took a pitcher from the fridge and poured 2 glasses of the lemonade Eleanor had always kept on hand, placing a slice of lemon on the rim of each glass, just as she used to do. He brought the glasses out to the porch. Leo was sitting in one of the rockers, looking out at the garden. They sat in a comfortable silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the gentle creak of the rocking chairs. "Are you a grandpa?" Leo asked suddenly. The question hit Arthur with a surprising force. "Yes," he said, "I am. I have a granddaughter, Lily, and a grandson, Jake." "Do they live here?" Leo asked, looking toward the silent house. "No," Arthur said, the familiar ache returning, but duller this time. They live far away. Just then, the phone inside began to ring. It was Sunday. It would be Sarah. Scene 5. "Excuse me for a moment, Leo," he said, rising from his chair. He went inside and picked up the receiver. "Hi, Daddy." "It's me." Sarah's cheerful voice came through the line, layered with the familiar sounds of domestic chaos. "How are you doing this week?" "I'm doing all right, sweetheart." "I'm fine." He glanced out the screen door and saw Leo, still sitting on the porch, patiently rocking. "That's good. Listen, I can't talk for long. I just wanted to call and check in. We're thinking of you. The kids say hi." "Tell them I say hi too," Arthur said. "Okay, sweetie, I really have to go." "I love you. I'll call next week." "I love you too, Sarah." The line was dead. He hung up the phone. The contrast between the rushed, distant call and the real, solid presence of the boy on his porch hanging starkly in the air. He went back outside. Leo was just finishing his lemonade. "Well, I should probably go," he said. "Thanks again for finding my ball, Mr. Arthur." "And for the lemonade. You're very welcome, Leo. Come by any time." He watched Leo run off until he disappeared down the street. The porch felt empty again, but it was a different kind of emptiness. It wasn't a void. It was just a space, waiting to be filled again. Arthur sat back down in his rocker and looked out at the garden. He saw the patch he had weeded. He saw the empty bird feeder. He remembered Eleanor's delight at the flash of a cardinal's red wings. He stood up, went to the small shed at the side of the house, and came back with a screwdriver and a can of oil. He took the bird feeder down from its hook on the old oak tree. The hinge on the lid was rusted shut. It would take some work to fix. But for the first time in a very long time, Arthur felt like he had all the time in the world and a reason to use it, were seeds of connection. Scene 1, the following days settled into a rhythm that was subtly, yet significantly different. Arthur still woke to the silence, but now it held the faint echo of Leo's laughter, the memory of his bright smile. He still drank his coffee, looking out at Eleanor's garden, but instead of seeing only neglect, he saw the small, neat patch he had cleared. He saw potential. The bird feeder became his new project. The rusted hinge fought him every step of the way, resisting the screwdriver and the oil with the stubbornness of old age. His fingers ached, and his vision, even with his glasses, sometimes blurred at the intricate mechanism. Yet, he persevered. He worked on it each morning after coffee, sometimes for only 15 minutes before his back protested, but he always returned to it. It was a tangible task, a small battle he could win, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he felt the quiet satisfaction of productive labor. On Wednesday, as he was meticulously cleaning out the feeder, scrubbing away years of grime, a sound startled him. Knock, knock. He went to the front door, expecting a delivery or perhaps a solicitor. But when he opened it, there stood Leo, not with a baseball glove, but with a small, brightly colored kite. "Hi, Mr. Arthur," Leo beamed. "Are you busy?" "Not at all, Leo." "Come in," Arthur said, surprised but pleased. He stepped aside, letting the boy in. Leo looked around the quiet living room with wide, curious eyes. "My dad helped me make this kite," Leo explained, holding it up. It was a simple diamond shape, decorated with marker drawings of planets and stars. "We were going to fly it in the park, but it's too windy there. It keeps getting tangled in the trees. My dad said your backyard looks big and open." Arthur looked out the window at the expanse of his lawn, surrounded by the mature oak trees that indeed Arthur confirmed. It's a good spot. Could we try to fly it here? Just for a little bit? Leo asked, his eyes full of that eager hope. Arthur's heart gave a little flutter. This was what he had missed, this spontaneous, joyful intrusion of young life. Of course, Leo. Let's go. They went out to the backyard. The grass was long in places, but there was a wide, clear space in the center. Arthur found himself moving with a lightness he hadn't felt in ages. He watched as Leo unfurled the kite string, his brow furrowed in concentration. Okay, Mr. Arthur, I need you to hold it up high, and when I say now, you let go and I'll run, Leo instructed, his voice filled with the excitement of the moment. Arthur carefully held the kite aloft, its lightweight frame almost weightless in his hands. He looked at the colorful drawing of Saturn, its rings a bright orange. He could almost feel Eleanor's presence, smiling at the sight. She loved children. She would have adored Leo. Ready, Mr. Arthur? Leo called from across the lawn, his small figure poised for flight. Ready, Leo. Now! Arthur released the kite, and Leo ran, a blur of motion across the grass. The kite soared, caught by an invisible current, higher and higher, a vibrant splash of color against the blue sky. Leo laughed, a pure, uninhibited sound that filled the quiet garden with a symphony of joy. Arthur stood there, watching, a smile spread across his face. It wasn't his kite, and it wasn't his grandson, but for that moment, in that garden, he felt connected. He felt part of something alive. He clapped when the kite dipped, and then soared again, riding the currents like a triumphant bird. They spent the next hour flying the kite. When it finally came down, tangled slightly in the branches of the oak tree, Arthur helped Leo carefully untangle it, his old fingers surprisingly nimble as he worked the string free. Thank you, Mr. Arthur, Leo said, carefully winding the string back onto its spool. That was awesome. It was, wasn't it? Arthur agreed, a pleasant warmth settling in his chest. You're quite the kite flyer. As they walked back toward the house, Arthur noticed something else. The sun was catching a glint of metal near the rose bushes. He knelt down, his eyes squinting. It was a small, ornate silver locket. He recognized it instantly. It was Eleanor's. She had worn it on their wedding day, a tiny, treasured heirloom from her grandmother. He had thought it lost for years, after she'd told him it must have fallen off while she was gardening. He picked it up, his thumb tracing the delicate engraving on its surface. He looked at the tangled rose bushes, then at the freshly weeded patch where he had found the baseball. If he hadn't gone out there, if Leo hadn't come by, he never would have seen it. It felt like a small, unexpected gift from the past, made possible by the present. What's that, Mr. Arthur? Leo asked, peering over his shoulder. It's my wife's, Arthur said, his voice soft. She lost it years ago. I found it when I was looking for your baseball the other day. Leo looked at the locket, then back at Arthur, a flicker of understanding in his young eyes. It's pretty, he said simply. As Leo prepared to leave, Arthur stopped him at the door. Leo, he said, if you ever want to fly your kite again, or just want some lemonade, you're always welcome. Leo's smile was his only answer. Thanks, Mr. Arthur. See you. He waved and ran off, the colorful kite tucked under his arm. Arthur watched him go, then closed the door, the locket clutched in his hand. He went to the kitchen, carefully wiped the dust from the locket, and placed it on the mantelpiece, right beside the photograph of him and Eleanor on their 50th anniversary. It was a tiny piece of her, returned to him, a symbol of something found in the midst of loss. dusk settled, Arthur felt a different kind of quiet. Not the oppressive, hungry silence he had grown accustomed to, but a gentle, reflective stillness. He sat in his armchair, not watching the television, but looking out at the fading light in the backyard. He saw the space where Leo had flown his kite, and he imagined the bright splash of color against the sky. He thought of Michael and Sarah, of Lily and Jake. The longing was still there, a deep, abiding ache, but it was accompanied by a new, softer emotion, a burgeoning sense of hope. He still missed them terribly, but he also realized that connection could come in unexpected forms. It wasn't just about the family he had made. It was about the connections he could still forge, the small ways he could still be a part of a vibrant, living world. He picked up the phone. It wasn't Tuesday, and it wasn't Sunday. This was unscheduled. He dialed Sarah's number first, letting it ring a few times. He didn't have anything specific to say, just a quiet yearning to hear her voice, unhurried if possible. After several rings, her voicemail picked up, the familiar chaos still audible in the background. "Hey, it's Sarah. Leave a message." Arthur hung up. He paused for a moment, then dialed Michael's number. It rang, and then his professional-sounding voicemail clicked on. "You've reached Michael Sterling. Please leave a message, and I'll get back to you." Arthur didn't leave a message for either of them. He just held the phone for a long moment, then placed it back in its cradle. The connections he craved, the deep familial bonds, still felt distant, wrapped in their busy lives. But he didn't feel the same crushing disappointment. He had made a new connection today, a smaller one perhaps, but a real one. A bright, colorful kite soaring in his backyard, a lost locket found, a young boy's open smile. These were small seeds, but they were growing. Scene 1, the bird feeder, now clean and functional, became the new center of the garden's universe. Arthur had driven to the hardware store, a journey that had felt like an expedition, and bought a large bag of birdseed. The next morning, he filled the feeder, and by the afternoon, the first visitors arrived. A pair of bold blue jays, their calls a raucous announcement of life's return. Soon, sparrows, finches, and even a brilliant red cardinal, Eleanor's favorite, flocked to the feeder. Arthur would sit in the breakfast nook, his yellow mug of coffee in hand, and watch them. Each flutter of wings was a small victory against the crushing silence. His work in the garden expanded. The small, neat patch grew, spreading along the stone path like a slow, determined tide, pushing back the sea of weeds. He bought new gloves. He learned the names of the flowers he was trying to save. It was hard, aching work, but it was honest. It was creation. Leo remained a welcome, sporadic presence. Sometimes he'd appear with his kite, other times with a scraped knee from a bike fall, and once with a frog he'd caught by the creek, wanting to show Mr. Arthur before he let it go. Their friendship was simple, built on shared lemonade and the quiet space of a porch, but for Arthur, it was a lifeline. One afternoon, the phone rang. It was a Thursday. Arthur nearly let it go to the machine, assuming it was a telemarketer, but on the fourth ring he picked it up. "Hello?" "Dad, it's Michael." Arthur was taken aback. "Michael, is everything all right? It's not Tuesday." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Yeah, Dad. Everything's fine. I had a moment. I was sitting in my office, looking out at the city, and I just thought of you." His voice was different. Devoid of its usual rush, it sounded tired, more thoughtful. "Well, that's nice of you, son. Arthur said, sinking into the armchair by the phone. How have you really been, Dad? The question, so simple and direct, disarmed Arthur. He didn't give his usual safe reply. He thought of the past few weeks. You know, Michael, he began slowly, I've been spending a lot of time in your mother's garden. I fixed that old bird feeder. We have cardinals again. He went on, his voice finding a new energy. He told him about the weeds and about finding Eleanor's locket. And then he told him about Leo. He told him about the baseball and the kite. He wasn't complaining or asking for anything. He was simply sharing his life. On the other end of the line, in a high-rise office in Chicago, Michael listened, a knot forming in his stomach. His father sounded different. He sounded engaged. He was picturing it all. His dad, alone, tending to the garden, finding a piece of his mother's history. He heard the story of Leo, a 10-year-old boy flying a kite in the yard where he himself had grown up, and a sharp, unfamiliar pang of guilt and envy struck him. His own son, Jake, barely knew that yard. He barely knew the man on the other end of the phone. His dutiful check-in calls suddenly felt hollow, a flimsy substitute for real connection. A kite, huh? Michael said, his own voice sounding thick with emotion. I haven't flown a kite in 30 years. It was a good day, Arthur said simply. After he hung up, Michael sat staring at a picture on his desk. It was of his own family, his wife, Lily, Jake, all smiling at a theme park last summer. They looked happy, but he suddenly felt a profound sense of dislocation. He was building a life for his children, but he was letting their roots, their history, wither from neglect. That evening, he had a long talk with his wife. 10 days later, on a bright Saturday morning, Arthur was on his knees by the hydrangeas, carefully planting a row of impatiens he'd bought. He heard the sound of a car, different from the usual neighborhood traffic, and looked up to see an unfamiliar sedan pull into his driveway. He watched, puzzled, as the driver's side door opened. A man got out, a man with his posture, with Eleanor's eyes, now etched with the lines of stress and responsibility. It was Michael. Arthur's trowel fell from his hand. He slowly pushed himself to his feet, his heart thudding a loud, hopeful rhythm against his ribs. The passenger door opened, and then the back doors. His daughter-in-law, then Lily, and then a blur of motion as Jake shot out of the car and ran across the lawn. Grandpa! The word, shouted with the uninhibited joy of a child, was the most beautiful sound Arthur had ever heard. Jake cannoned into his legs, wrapping his arms around him in a tight hug. Arthur bent down, his creaking joints forgotten, and held his grandson, burying his face in the boy's hair, breathing in the scent of life and sunshine. The house, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, was loud. It was filled with the glorious, chaotic symphony of family. Shoes were kicked off by the door, bags were dropped in the hall, and the refrigerator was opened and closed a dozen times. Lily, now a young woman with a smart, kind face, was showing him photos on her phone, her arm linked through his. Michael was on the back porch, examining a loose step with a thoughtful frown, a toolbox already open at his feet. Later, Arthur found himself in the kitchen, making a pitcher of lemonade. Only this time, he was flanked by two small, eager assistants. Can I put the lemons in, Grandpa? Jake asked. Me too, Lily chimed in. He looked at their faces, so full of life and promise, and felt a wave of love so powerful it almost buckled his knees. This was it. This was everything. The ache of Eleanor's absence was still there, a soft, tender spot in his heart, but it was no longer a desolate void. It was a space filled with her memory, surrounded by the thriving, beautiful family they had created together. As evening settled, painting the sky in the familiar shades of bruised purple and orange, Arthur sat on his porch swing. This time, he was not alone. Michael sat beside him, the swing moving in a slow, comfortable rhythm. In the yard, Jake was trying to teach Lily how to fly Leo's kite, which Arthur had borrowed for the occasion. The kite dipped and danced in the gentle breeze, its colorful tail a streamer of pure joy. The birds were having their final meal at the feeder, their chirps a soft evening song. Arthur's phone rang inside, and his daughter-in-law brought it out to him. It was Sarah. Michael had told her their plans. "Hi, Daddy," she said, her voice warm. "Michael told me he was staging a surprise attack. It sounds like you have a full house." "We do," Arthur said, a smile in his voice. He could hear Sarah's own children in the background, and for the first time, their noise didn't feel like a reminder of his own quiet. It felt like a harmony. He looked at his son beside him, at his grandchildren playing in the yard that he and Eleanor had filled with love. He saw the tended flowers, the full bird feeder, the kite soaring against the twilight sky. The crushing weight of loneliness had lifted. His world had been shrunk to the four walls of his house, but his family, along with the unexpected friendship of a little boy with a baseball, had knocked down those walls and let the light back in. He was not a ghost in a museum. He was Arthur. He was a father. He was a grandfather.